Police officers in Texas destroyed a woman's home and ended up leaving her with an enormous repair bill. So now this is Vicki Baker, and she is a 76-year-old woman that was living in McKinney, Texas, and she went through a pretty big nightmare. Okay, so now her home, and she had two homes at one point, and in one of her homes in Texas, there was a fugitive that had held a 15-year-old hostage inside that house. Now, thankfully, she was not living there at the time. She was actually looking to sell the house when this happened, as she had moved somewhere else. But in trying to apprehend the suspect, the police, and you can see the picture, did all that damage to that home. And I have to say, needlessly. So now, Baker, as a result, is now teaming up with a libertarian law firm. And so understand, like, I don't agree on a lot of issues with libertarians, but when it comes to things like this, no, I'm actually on their side. And they're on our side, because nobody wants their home to be destroyed by police and not get compensation for it. And so now let me give you more of the details here. All right. So now, all right, her daughter, this woman's daughter, Vicki Baker, this is Deanna Baker, was preparing the home for sale while Baker was living out of state. And so she had seen a Facebook post Deanna had from a woman who'd said a man named Wesley Little had run off with her 15-year-old daughter. So now she recognized that person, and that's why this Facebook post actually matters. Because she had ended up actually working with him before. The family had hired Little to do some odd jobs at the home back in 2018 before letting him go because he had made Baker's children uncomfortable. So now how that factors in is that, well, since Little had been to that home before, that was one of the places that he decided to run to. So now he showed up at the home with the girl and said that he needed a place to stay and to park his car, according to a lawsuit. Deanna, I mean, what do you do in that situation? You do what you can, and then you get away. You get away, you call the cops. And that's what happened. Deanna called her mother, and they called the McKinney police together. Deanna then gave police, when they entered, a code to enter the home and a garage door opener. So now the girl ended up being able to leave that home during the standoff unharmed, so that was very, very good. However, Little himself was entrenched. He was heavily armed, and look, I think that he was basically looking for suicide by cop. That's what happens. Now, the police were happy to oblige. Although it didn't end up actually happening, he ended up committing suicide. That said, according to the lawsuit, Baker, while watching this unfold on social media in her home in Montana, saw the video that showed tear gas canisters being shot into the window of her Texas home. Now, she had previously asked the police, please don't destroy my home. You got to get them out, I understand, but please try to minimize the damage. All right. Well, that ended up not happening. During the hours-long standoff ending with the suicide of this man, SWAT officers shot apparently 30 tear gas canisters into her property, blew up her garage door, and drove an armored vehicle over the fence. Just, because. Now, even her daughter's dog, which came out running out of the home during the standoff, ended up nearly blind and completely deaf from the results of the tear gas. And if that's not bad enough, the family gets stuck with the bill for the damages. Now, this was happening while she was trying to sell the home. Now, the 76-year-old said she needed the money to fund her retirement, but thanks to the extensive damage, the sale of that home quickly fell through. So now that's going to be pretty tough to retire, losing out of the income from that home, through, of course, no fault of her own. Now, the city of McKinney had refused to help out financially, and Baker's insurance company also said that it would not cover any destruction caused by the government. Her insurance provider did only cover the cost of cleaning up blood from the suicide that happened inside the house. And I can only imagine how terrible that would have been. Now, the city itself said that, hey, man, look, it wasn't we're not liable for the damage. We didn't do that. Oh, but the police work for you. They work for the city. What do you mean you're not liable for this? Apparently, there were no laws in the books saying that police would be held liable for damages to private property. And so, as a result, she had to, of course, fund the repairs herself, ran up her credit card and borrowed from her retirement, the thing that she was supposed to fund with this, in order to cover the cost of getting the property back in order and completing the sale. So she took a massive, massive loss on this. Luckily for her, people in Texas also, according to the article, this is in Vice, local businesses donated materials and cash to try to help her get her house back in order, which is good. And she did able to sell the home, but ended up losing some of the value and not being able to get the full value of the home from that sale. So she ended up, like I said, taking a big loss from this. So now, as a result, she is suing the city for this. What she said is, quote, "What I want is justice for everybody that this happens to." Well, I mean, it's not unreasonable. Yeah, I also don't want this to happen to other people. So great. I'm with you. And again, one libertarian law firm is covering this, and another one is also sending messages of support. In fact, in 2015, here's the thing. This has happened before, okay? And so there's a reason that these law firms are getting behind it, behind this case. And it's because it has happened. This is just the newest case. In fact, Colorado cops back in 2015 blew up a man's home while trying to get to an armed shoplifting suspect. So blow up a person's house to get a shoplifter. Hope that was worth it. Y'all. Wow. More than 4 years later, a federal appeals court decided the property owner was not entitled to compensation to cover the wreckage, since they said police were preserving public safety by going after the shoplifter. The shoplifter. The homeowner, by the way, had no connection to the shoplifting suspect, but nonetheless, innocent bystander. Doesn't matter. You're on the hook. Hey, that's your problem. I mean, if you're unlucky enough for someone to randomly choose your home, barricade themselves into a standoff in, or business, by the way, because I've actually seen this happen personally. There was years ago in a small town that I lived in, there was, and it was probably like, back in the early 2000s, there was a standoff in a motel that ended up, I believe, with a suicide. Violent standoff, right? So any damages to that motel, had the police stormed in and, wrecked the place, well, would have fallen, I think, likely on the owner of that motel. So, yeah, that's a problem. But here's the thing. According to Baker's lawsuit with the Institute for Justice, the government is supposed to pay for the damage that it's caused, even if the destruction is a result of something good, like trying to arrest fugitives. If they're not held accountable, and this makes sense, the police can just destroy anything they want. That's a terrible precedent. It's also incredibly unconstitutional. In fact, under the Takings Clause of the Constitution's Fifth Amendment, private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. So, as it stands now, you can't take private property without giving something in return. Unless, of course, you're using eminent domain, which I am also firmly against in a lot of cases. So now, Texas's Constitution also similarly calls for adequate compensation if a person's private property is taken, damaged, or destroyed during public use. Well, the police are public. I'm just saying. Now, unfortunately for us, lower courts have invented an exception to the Takings Clause: destruction caused by police. According to Jeffrey Redfern, an attorney at the Institute for Justice who is also working on Baker's case. That interpretation, he says, is incorrect. Intentional damage caused by the government is supposed to be compensable. It's not about wrongdoing on the police's part. I'm gonna disagree with that a little bit. All right. It's certainly not about holding any individual police officers liable. It's just about what burdens should be borne by the public and what burdens should be borne by random unlucky individuals, Redfern said. And look, here's the thing. The government, okay. Let me give you another quote before I get into that. All right. Daniel Weislaw, an attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation, another libertarian public interest law firm that is not involved in the case, said this: if the government won't be on the hook for any cost from the damage, cops have little reason to stop and think before they bash up someone's home. And that's absolutely correct. The incentive structure that's created when the government is not accountable for destroying or taking private property is that they're going to do that more. They're going to be more destructive. They're going to use more military equipment, Weislaw said. This is why. This is one of the reasons why police, I don't think they need Bearcats, APCs, or heavy military equipment. Okay, this is one of those reasons why they don't need that. All right. I mean, the other is that they tend to use this heavy equipment, this heavy artillery, against peaceful pipeline protesters, like in the case of Standing Rock, or against minorities in the case of, the peaceful BLM riot, not riots, but the peaceful BLM protests, 93% of which were peaceful, wholly peaceful. And so they tend to use that against those, those groups of people. Now, this happens to be a wealthy white Texas woman. Okay. But again, in this case, police took it way too far, as they're wont to do. So now, why did they, for example, need to blow up the garage door? Why? Why did they need to do that? They were provided with a garage door opener. They couldn't just go click. No, they had to blow it up. It's insane. But here's the thing. They wanted to blow it up because they could. Because they were able to get away with it. Again, this is the same reason why we don't need qualified immunity for police officers. If you don't have any rules for conduct, if nobody is held accountable for what they do and the amount of force that they use, guess what they're going to do? They're going to use maximum force. That's what they're trained for. Also, it's human nature. All right. You got a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. I mean, why use a scalpel when you can use a chainsaw? I mean, because for one, chainsaws are fucking awesome. Okay. And if you don't get punished, if nothing bad happens to you, if you accidentally cut off someone's arm with a chainsaw or blow up their house, especially if you're provided the toys to do that, then why wouldn't you do that? Because blowing shit up is fucking cool. Okay. Except when it's somebody's house. But again, that's the police mentality. I want to use my toys. I got this really heavy military equipment. I'm going to use it. It's going to be fun. That's why we need rules. And look, blowing up the garage door, it's also lazy police work, by the way. And it's no risk to them. It's super, super lazy. And guess what? They get to blow shit up. I mean, why would you not want to do that? Why would they not? Why would they not? We need to rein in police. We need the rules for them, okay? We need to make sure that they are held accountable when they do this. Because guess what? That stops them from doing it. It's pretty simple as that. All right? Now, there is one city that's working towards it, and conservatives will, their heads will explode. It's Baltimore. Baltimore, police basically tore apart a man's home in Baltimore in order to get off, or I'm sorry, not in order to get off. That's a Freudian slip right there. In order to get somebody who, was involved in a standoff. Okay. And so as a result of that, there are laws in the books now in Baltimore that make sure that if that happens to your home, you end up getting compensated by the police, because they should. And if all cities did that, and if we had some accountability, then this would not happen. And isn't that, I mean, shouldn't that be everybody's goal, to reduce things like this from happening? I would think so. But what do I know? If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.